Hello, hello, hello. I am so excited you're here, my friend. I want us to do our official intro so we can chat a little bit. Does that work for you? All
Sure.
right, let's do it. Let me get it up here. Hey, y'all. I am Christine Gautreaux. I'm a white social justice advocate, an international speaker, coach, and best-selling author and publisher. And I'm a dancing social worker who helps you upgrade your self and community care.
Excellent. I love that. I'm Dr. Cynthia Phelps, and I'm an international speaker, certified mindfulness instructor, and the founder of Inner Ally, which is a company that builds evidence based tools to improve the inside of you, your relationship with yourself.
Mm. And together we are a podcast rooted in the 8 dimensions of wellness. And we like to get together every week with for intentional conversations about how to be wise in business, relationship, and wellness. And this week we're talking about mental and emotional wellness. And that's why I invited Dr. Phelps to be my co-host today. And I not only a phenomenal human, one of my best friends, and a Women Connected in Wisdom author. So, Cynthia, I am so excited you are here.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm super glad to be here.
Right. So, let's just do a regular check in. How are you?
I'm doing good. I feel like all of a sudden I've landed in summer and I'm like, woo, here we are.
Right. Boy, I think a lot of our country has landed in summer with the heat wave. It's been a little tricky. That and FIFA being here and having soccer madness all around. I know you're a little removed from it being in North Carolina, but in Atlanta, we've been having a lot of fun and a lot of exciting things going on.
Nice.
What is bringing you joy this summer?
Oh gosh. I think right now painting for me
Mm,
is bringing me joy.
I love that. I love you're such an incredible painter too.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. I was doing a technique this weekend that my 6-year-old nephew taught me. It was so fun. And it's so simple. And I don't know if he learned it at camp or at school, but you take like a magazine or a calendar and you use paint to outline or trace what you want to kind of pick up. And then you wet your paper and you do a transfer that way. And it makes some really cool art, and it was simple and fun, and it just reminded me, we don't always have to know what we're doing to have fun and create.
Yeah, in fact, sometimes having a plan makes it less fun.
Right. Well, today we are talking about emotional and mental wellness. So, for our listeners, let me give our Women Connected in Wisdom definition, which is emotional and mental wellness is about being aware and intentional of our feelings in all situations. It includes having the capacity and tools to handle and express those emotions in a healthy manner, and the ability to learn and grow from experience. Emotional well being encourages autonomy, useful decision making skills, and striving towards good mental health. How does that fit with your definition with Inner Ally?
Mm, yeah, it really feels good in my body. And in Inner Ally, I'm very much focused on how people have a good relationship with themselves. And so we use the power of self-compassion to make sure that relationship is really healthy. And I really feel like that's a bedrock of our mental health.
I agree with you, and our emotional and mental wellness, right?
Exactly.
And what I've known from hanging out for you for years and watching you grow Inner Ally is that often we don't even realize the tapes that are playing in our head, or we don't even realize how we're speaking to ourselves. Because I consider myself a really positive person, but I sometimes am really hard on myself when I make a mistake or when I feel like I screwed something up. So Dr. Phelps is always my go-to person. Like, it's like, hey, am I like what? And you're so good at that, like teaching us to rescript and how do we talk to ourselves and what is healthy versus what are stories we may have picked up from other places. And so I'm so grateful you're here. How
Hmm.
about we introduce our guest and bring her up on stage? You want to read her bio?
That sounds like a great idea. I'm excited to meet her. Veronica Pulido is the co-founder and CEO of Aflote. She started Aflote after watching her family struggle to care for her dad through a rare cancer and realizing how little support exists for life's hardest moments. She had just been planning her wedding, surrounded by planners and tools like the Knot and Zola, built to help everyone show up for a joyful occasion. And she couldn't stop asking why nothing like that existed for a family in crisis. Aflote is the answer. One shared place where families can facing a serious illness can rally their community and turn let me know if you need anything into help that actually shows up.
Oh my gosh. I can't wait to have this conversation. Let's welcome Veronica to the stage. Veronica, welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much, Christine and Cynthia. I really appreciate you both having me on.
Well, we are delighted. And you may not know this, Cynthia, but Veronica comes from Texas and
Oh,
she's
nice.
in Austin, Texas, which Cynthia and I have both lived in Texas and have lots of dear friends and people in that state. And I know being in North Carolina and Georgia, we're fussing about the heat, but I can only imagine what it's like right now in Austin,
We've forgotten.
Texas.
We're at toasty 96 degrees right now, which seems to be on the cooler end for a Texas summer. So,
Right?
yes.
Oh my God. Yeah. When I first moved here, I laughed because Atlanta was 10 degrees cooler than Texas. But we call it Hot Atlanta. And I've been here almost 20 years. So now oh, we're hot. And I don't go to Texas during the summer if I can help it at all. It's like, let me visit them in the spring or the fall.
That's a smart choice for sure.
So Veronica, I love what you're doing and your company.
Thank
You
you.
and I have had conversations about it multiple times, and that's why I wanted you to come on and tell our audience about it because it is such a cool platform. Will you talk a little bit more? I know about your origin story, and our listeners just heard that about your dad, but will you talk about what Aflote really is and what it does and why?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I've been building and iterating for the last year and, testing things out with people. And inevitably, both from my experience and when we would interview caregivers and families, like the first thing is you're always so overwhelmed, right? Like we get prepared for so many things, but illness, is just not one of them. And when you're going through something like in our case, my dad had a terminal rare cancer, your world gets flipped upside down. And it was all of a sudden a flurry of like doctor's appointments. Do we get second opinions? Like what resources are out there? Where do we go? And the reality is that when you're dealing with a serious illness, it depends on every scenario. But in our case, my dad was sick for 2 years and it was a journey, right? And, we're a very tight knit family. And, my mom was his primary caregiver, but me and my brother lived close by and my sister would visit a lot. And even though we all try to pitch in, it is so much work. You're going through appointments, you're trying to track insurance, you're trying to figure out what's the right treatment, all while, dealing with anticipatory grief and understanding of the situation and all of these things that you can't quite control. So we just felt so lost, and it just felt like we reinvented the wheel time and time again. And to the point of what Aflote does is you do frequently have friends and family that ask for help, but it then falls on the caregiver to coordinate them. And oftentimes as a caregiver, they feel bad about truly being like, hey, here's what would be helpful, right? Like you don't want to impose on other people. You don't know how to ask for help. So what we've been building is a care coordination platform where we're making it incredibly easy for the family to say, hey, this is what would be most helpful. It could be, I need someone to come walk the dog or water the plants or take dad to chemo on these days, or, oftentimes people want to come visit. People are texting to see how they're doing and getting updates, and it's very sweet and well-meaning. In our case, we make it very easy for the family to share updates, and, the people who are following along and pitching in to help essentially almost subscribe to your float. And this way, when it's hey, we had a round of chemo and things are going well, or hey, we have a round of surgery and this is the latest, instead of having to field hundreds of texts with friends, family, coworkers. You just post it once, everyone gets the message, they see it, they see how to help, and it really just helps you activate your community so that we, you know, help reduce a lot of that overwhelm, and really help the caregivers and the family out as they're navigating this illness.
Well, I love that. And I love that it's not just helping the caregiver and the family out, it's people that love the person that's in crisis too. Like I
Yes.
have a niece right now that's going through cancer, and I don't want to ask her mom for updates because I know her mom's overwhelmed. But man, I want to know what's going on.
100%.
And also just watching her go through this, the news was so unexpected. It was such a big deal. And it took a couple of weeks before everybody that was supposed to be on the text list got on and it wasn't for lack of love. It wasn't for it was just, there was so much happening,
Right.
right? And
Right.
I remember the same thing when I went through it with my dad. And Ronna, can I ask how old was your dad when this happened?
He was 57 when he was diagnosed. He
So
was very young.
very young,
Yeah.
not expecting it.
Yeah.
I think about our friend Dr. Collins' daughter when she went through terminal cancer,
Hmm.
and her friends and her sorority sisters literally brought their family meals for 2 years
Wow.
because it
That's
was
so great.
so intense. But there
Yeah.
was a lot of coordination.
Right.
There was one person that had to take that role. And
Right.
sometimes we don't have that one person,
Right. No,
right?
to your point. And there's some great tools out there, to your point. Like there's meal train, there's caring break. The challenge is that oftentimes with these things, to your point, it falls on one person. And what we're trying to do is give you all of those resources. You can add other family admins. So you could add, in our case, I could have added my mom and my siblings
Mhm.
and the aunt who was super involved in the care, and everyone could have help delegate tasks. We have access to a shared calendar so that everyone can stay up to date, because sometimes that's very tricky, as a
Mhm.
family or a community to navigate. And then also, who are the key doctors and what's the pharmacy, and all of these things to really help lighten the mental load for those going through it.
Mm.
So nice. I am really impressed with the name that you came up for your company. Do you have a story behind that?
We do actually. When my dad was sick, uh, oftentimes when my mom and I would talk through it, he was interesting. My dad was a little bit old school, right? Like he was strong and rarely talked about whether he was struggling or afraid or going through it. But when he would talk to my mom, and she would share, it's like it was a lot of like barely feeling like you're just keeping your head above water, right? Like you are just trying to stay afloat, and you are trying not to drown with the endless thing, everything going on around you. So afloat to us really represented that safe space where it's, we're helping keep you afloat, and you are able to lean on your community and your loved ones to hold you up and give you a little break to breathe and relax, and to know that you're safe. So that's a lot of what we wanted to embody, and part of why we chose that name for us.
Mm.
Beautiful.
I love because that's one of the things that I don't think we often talk about is when there's a serious illness, when there's a death, when there's something like that, it is just one part of your life. It's a
Mhm.
huge, overwhelming part of your life, but the
Yeah.
electric company still wants to get paid. Taxes are still due. Your car repair, like all the things that are I'm just realizing I'm about 2 years out from when my dad passed away, and
Mm.
there's some things I'm just realizing that I set down or didn't handle that I thought I handled because I was so overwhelmed with the
Right.
travel and what was going on and the caregiving that it was, I was in survival mode.
Yeah.
So, I love the idea of a tool that
Abs-
can help us put it all in one place, and as you said, like, take off the mental load.
Absolutely.
Now, I know you've done a lot of research and have a lot of resources about grief and loss.
Mhm.
Um, let's talk about that in relationship to illness and caregiving and emotional and mental wellness. Like, as you were building this platform, as you're thinking about that, what were some of the things that were coming up for you?
Yeah, it's been I think a lot, even building this company has been a very cathartic experience, because I think there's so many things that I didn't realize were impacting me so much. When my dad was sick, I actually, it took me a couple years to realize this, but I developed a eating disorder actually, and a lot of this was, going through a lot of therapy and trying to work through it, when you are feeling like you really don't have control and there's so much going on in my body, and maybe like my perfectionist tendencies, and I was always into like health and fitness, I really turned into like something that I could really control, right? And that was in an interesting way my way of coping with that anticipatory grief. And oftentimes with my dad's treatment, like, we talked about things, but he still ate what he wanted to eat, he still did what he wanted to do, and I just felt so powerless to support him throughout that. So it was very humbling for me. From a mental health perspective, I'd never really experienced anything like that before, and it truly took control of my mind. And like, what I had was orthorexia. So like, you get over fixated on working out and counting calories and all of these things. And so that was one thing that I had to deal with. And then eventually, when he did pass, we were very open about discussing and talking. But what I also discovered was, while I had a great relationship with my dad while he was alive, there were some things that happened after his death that, like, you can't we just never got to communicate and talk about. And there was all this unresolved grief and pain, and it's always hard to feel those emotions of someone that's gone, right? And so it also took me a long time. I started to get anxiety and trouble sleeping and all of these things that I couldn't quite pinpoint back to grief. So that was another interesting discovery. But to your point, Christine, and I know that you have a lot of wonderful resources, it has been a lot of going to therapy and discovering great books and communities, and great coaching sessions. I've invested a lot in coaching and support to help me be able to put down my thoughts on paper and navigate, and get a little bit more clarity and closure through the grief.
I love that for you. Yeah. It's grief is sneaky, right? And we don't. Oh, I love you've been talking about anticipatory grief. So I want to define that for our listeners. That is when grief and loss is coming, right? You're anticipating that it's going to happen. So you're kind of grieving in advance. And
Yeah.
I think some people think, because I definitely was doing that with my dad, because it was clear that it was happening. But what I think you don't realize is you're still gonna grieve when it happened. Like,
Yeah.
you're like, "Wait, I've been doing the anticipatory grief." And I even did anticipatory. Cynthia can laugh at me because we've been, she was so with me during this process. But when my kids were getting ready when I was gonna be an empty nester, I
Yeah.
really was intentional about anticipatory grieving because I loved having my kids at home. I was, so I do all this anticipatory grieving. And sorry, y'all. I have my phone turned off, but that's one that gets to get through. Um, but what happened was COVID hit. And
Mm.
so I did. So I did all this grieving, and then COVID hit, and they didn't leave. That was grief of another kind. And then it was about a year later that then they left again, right?
Yeah.
And so, like you said, life throws us curves, and we don't know how. Honestly, we don't know how we're going to respond to grief and loss.
Hmm. Yeah.
Cynthia, I want you to weigh in on this with your system and inner allies and just your knowledge about grief and loss and emotional and mental wellness.
Well, when it comes to grief and loss, I think that it's its own thing. It shows up when it wants to show up, and it stays as long as it wants to stay. And it can be in so many different forms. And you can have so many different emotions associated with it that range from what we consider things that are positive and enjoyable emotions to just like the deepest sorrow and despair. And so, really, when we experience grief and loss, it's kind of this opening to what is, And so, when I think about the inner ally process, it's really about making sure that you're supporting yourself on the inside. One, that you're recognizing that you're experiencing grief and
Mm-hmm.
loss and it's different emotions associated with it. And then two, showing up for yourself like you would like a really dear friend. When you're struggling, instead of just being like, why can't I work right now? Show up and be like, hey, friend, self, we need to take a little walk, or we need to like shut down the computer and quit for the day, just to really take care of ourselves or nurture ourselves. We need to call a good friend. What does our soul need to feel soothed and nurtured in the moment of really this kind of ride that we're on, that is grief and loss.
I love that. I remember, to your point, Cynthia, early on in my dad's illness, probably the first time where I was like, oh gosh, I probably need to go talk to someone. It was early and he was going through chemo, and I don't know, you often hear about like chemo, foggy brain and stuff like that. And it was like me, my mom, and my dad had agreed to like, I think they were going to come to my apartment and have breakfast with me. And, time comes, I'm waiting. They never come around. I call him and he's like, oh my gosh, I just ended up at like Target and I've been shopping and like, but he's like, but no worries, let me go now. And I just remember being enraged. And I was, but this kind of like anger that I hadn't felt for years, almost like a toddler level tantrum, where I was just so upset he had forgotten we were gonna meet. And even though he was like, hey, let me come, I was just like, no, I don't want to see you. And my logical brain kept being like, what are you doing? Like, A, you're being ridiculous. B, your dad's sick. You want to cherish the moments you can. Like, get over yourself and like just go see them. And it was so interesting to me it was this type of rage and like I was wallowing in my pain that I just had never really experienced or could really pinpoint. And that was a point where I was like, oh gosh, this is probably it, and I do need to talk to someone. And that's when I started to go to therapy for navigating his illness and everything. But it's very curious how it comes at you.
Right. And it's, if you're paying attention, if you're aware, when you hit that wall, when you've run to the edge of your coping mechanisms, that's such a powerful moment. And I have to say, I'm really impressed that you recognized it in the moment and was like, oh, time to get some help.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and that's a good point, because so many people like our age or older are like, oh, I can handle this. Or, like you said, Veronica, it would have been very easy. I've got a good family. I've got a tight knit family, but so many times we need outside support.
Yeah.
Because have y'all heard about the circle theory? Where when somebody's going through a crisis, they're in the center of the circle, and all the support goes in and all the complaining or everything goes out. And then, the person's in the center, and then the next is the closest. Like, so if they have a partner or their parent or their child, and then it goes out to friends, and it kind of, so anybody, if you go in, and I think about the circle theory when we think about this, because like, our family and friends are going through the same thing we are, probably differently, but often it's easier to go out with our emotions and our feelings and our grief. It's easier to go out to another person, a therapist, a coach, or good friend, versus to somebody who's, frankly dealing with it too, right? It's and that doesn't mean we don't talk to them or we don't share with them, but everybody goes through grief and loss differently.
Yeah.
And boy, I just have to name, some people are weird about it.
I want to name that everybody's weird, and like everybody gets a little weird according to their own baseline going through grief. And I want to really clarify too what you said about the circle method. So it's dump out, which means if you have to process your feelings, you choose somebody in an outer circle from you, and it's support in.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. Yeah. And we'll put a link to that in the show notes so you can check it out. But yeah, it is wild, and it's not just families, y'all. Like we
Mhm.
recently had a loss at one of the jobs I do, and colleagues, and I found it. I always kind of have my analytical brain on as a coach or as a therapist and a social worker, but it was fascinating, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but these are colleagues, so they're people I don't know as intimately as my family. I could kind of predict with my family, oh, this is because we know, right? Oh, this person's going to do this or this for, but with colleagues it was like, oh, whoa, right? And having a lot of compassion, and also being like, okay, this is grief. This is grief showing up in that email that just did not land
Weird
the right
ways.
way, or them taking up so much space when you're like, wait, that's not usually how they are, or right? So it is fascinating to me, just human nature,
Yeah.
right? And when we're out of balance with emotional and mental wellness, that we need resources. Like we need resources like Aflote. Like when I think about this, you and I've talked about it a lot because I'm really fascinated with it and I love it. E- People don't know what they don't know,
Mhm.
right? And to have something all in one place, that
Yeah.
it might be a little intimidating at first,
Yeah.
right? And if you're of the age that you're like, "Oh, I'm not good with computers," get your kid, get your grandkid,
Yeah.
get the neighborhood kid like, to get you set up. But the way I understand it, Veronica, is once it's set up, it's easy peasy.
Yes.
Even the setup was
Yeah.
really easy to me.
100%. Yeah, we really try to make it as simple as possible. And to your point, Christine, I think, like one of my probably favorite stories in learning to ask for help was very early on in my relationship with my husband, actually. And, he's a very sweet, sensitive soul. And, he was great at supporting me through my dad's illness. But I remember there was this one time where, like, my dad got these bad test results, and of course we immediately Google them and jump to conclusions, and we're like, this could mean that he like dies tomorrow, and I'm in the middle of a work conference, and like my mom's breaking down and my brother's freaking out, and I'm trying to like navigate my flight back, and what do we do? And I remember sharing this with him, and I think he was trying to be very empathetic, and he just started to like cry, and I remember just being so enraged by that at that moment, because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to keep everyone together. I can't, on top of that, keep you. And, in that moment, I hung up with him and I was like, we don't want to talk. And, of course, I was like, okay, I'm just going to break up with him. And clearly, I can't do a relationship at the same time that my like dad's sick. And I'm so thankful that I went up for a run, thought about it, came back, and I just called him and I was like, listen, like, I love you, but what I need for you is like right now I am everyone's rock. And I was like, I can't be yours. Like, I actually need you to be my rock, and I need you to be the
Mhm.
one to listen, and I need you to be the one to hold me up, because I just like literally can't take on another thing. And,
Mhm.
I think part of why I love him so much, why it worked out so well, he listened and he was like, hey, thank you for letting me know what you need. I can do that. And
Right.
he did that. And I think many times during our relationship, he would frequently say like, hey, I'd love to know what would be useful, whether it's like help your dad with taxes, or like help you guys. My dad at some point wanted like a lazy boy that he really wanted, like I can go do that research, or like certain things that he just would have loved to know what would have been helpful. And many people feel that angst of, like, to your point, Christine, what you mentioned with your niece, like you don't want to call and constantly check and add, but
Mhm.
it's so much easier when you know how to show up.
Right? If I had an app that could say, "Oh, hey, we need this on this date," I could do that,
Yeah.
right? Or I could plan a
Exactly.
trip, or I could send something through the mail, or, you know, I know when we were looking at the testing of it, and I know it's in beta testing, we're going to talk
Mhm.
about that in a few minutes, but you even had things on there like, like you were saying earlier, water the plants, walk the dog, pick up the mail. Like, I need somebody like that in real life, just regularly, not when I'm in crisis. But I love that, to be able to really be, and it helps you to think about it, because I saw that you put examples in there of like, what could you ask for help? And it might come through, it might not, but I think it's even a good tool to just name it. Like,
Yes.
what do we need during this time? Like,
Yeah.
what is happening? And I don't know. I mean, I just find our healthcare system, especially in the United States, so overwhelming when you're not sick.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, but when you have a fear of a bad diagnosis, or a diagnosis that's life-threatening or terminal, it's a really big deal. I've walked through
Absolutely.
that with a lot of people,
Yeah.
and it's not easy.
No, I agree. And, you know, to your point, like when I was going through my wedding, we did have the wedding website where we could put, our story and like the travel information and what's going on. And people could even see with like the gift registry and how to support. And I think, I imagine what weddings must have been like prior to these resources, but it was probably a lot of the same, like, everyone texting the bride and trying to figure it out. And now we as a society, I think, have become very accustomed to this resource being there and it being very easy for us to know everything that's important around the couple and how we can show up. And it's very seamless and easy to share our love and support. So that's a lot of our goal, to really begin to introduce a new tool where, when someone's going through that difficult moment, it just makes it very easy to know, keep up to date with updates, know how to show up and stay in the loop.
I
And
love
I
that.
think, like, because this is in a new field, it's not another wedding planner. When you're creating even the fields and things that people can fill out, what you're doing is you're creating a structure. You're normalizing the things that you have to do to walk somebody through an illness or a crisis, which is really helpful because we all don't have that checklist in our heads unless we've been through it.
Right. No, you're spot on.
Well, and what I realized, I felt really lucky because I'm a social worker, so I've walked through people through this for a lot of time, but it was so hard when it was personal, right? And I just kept thinking, I know I said it multiple times, I don't know how people do this that don't have the background I had or the resources,
Yeah.
because it's freaking overwhelming. Like, you're handling whatever you're handling at the moment, because every crisis is different. And often, like with my dad, he was at home and he wasn't doing great, but he was functioning
Yeah.
until his catastrophic fall. And in one day, everything changed.
Yeah.
He never went back to his house. So you're dealing with the medical, you're dealing with the grief and loss, you're dealing with a household that it needs, like, so many things. And every crisis like that is different. And our listeners know, if they've listened at any time at all, I had about 2 years of that because I lost 7 family members. So it was also like it was like the ocean. Every time I felt like I would stand up, another wave would come.
Yeah.
And if I'd have had a tool like Aflote, literally, because I've used that metaphor before even knowing about your platform, like, I might have been able to keep my head above water, because the only way I did was friends and people that I could call, and just when I was falling apart, knew, like, what can I do, and would show up. But there were so many times I didn't want to talk to people. Like, if I had one moment to myself, I didn't want to talk to somebody else. I literally just wanted to have a moment. So if I'd had this tool to be able to write a note that went out to everybody that wanted to know, because I got the feedback when I was going through it, that some people were upset with me because I wasn't leaning on them, or I wasn't calling them, or I wasn't I did not have the capacity or the bandwidth. So that's
That's
another
dumping
thing.
in.
That's dumping in, not dumping out, right?
Absolutely.
And people are human, right?
No,
People have their
100%.
feels, and they want to know. And then you've got family dynamics, right?
Yes.
About who likes who and who is. Oh, I love an idea of something that just goes out automatically, so there's not a hierarchy of who gets told first or
Yes.
second.
And to your point, Christine, we actually hear this a lot. And, we even interviewed a customer who was like, my husband was diagnosed and my parents, thinking that, they were being very sweet and supportive, first thing they did was get on a plane and showed up in our house. And like, my husband, who's going through chemo, it's like the last thing he wants are his in-laws at home when he's like struggling. And, now you have to go through the discomfort of being like, hey, thank you. But like, that actually wasn't what we needed. So we actually even have a feature for this where like on your float, you could be like, hey, like visits are paused at the moment. Like, do not, you can easily communicate without hurting someone's feelings, and sort of anticipate that as well, to say like, hey, visits not welcome, or like, hey, we're pausing a little bit from phone calls. But yes, here's the update so that you guys can stay up to date on everything.
Right. Well, and the boundaries, right? Yes. It gives another tool for boundaries, which I've witnessed this so many times with clients, with friends, and with family. Like, they feel compelled to, visit even when they feel horrible, or and so being able to say, hey, that doesn't work for me, or no, thank you, or what really would work is this, I think is, and everybody's different, right? Everybody's different before they're sick or have a terminal illness. So I think it's an interesting thing to think about, even within ourselves. All right, so let's pause that. Let's ask each other. All right, when you're sick, do you want somebody beside you and talking to you, or do you want to be left alone?
I can go first if you want.
Go ahead, Veronica.
I personally am, I'm a little bit of an extroverted introvert, so I definitely like I want to be left alone. I want to watch my shows. I think I do want people to reach out, but maybe to know that it's okay if I don't reply back, because then you're just like constantly feeling. So I like a little bit of space on my end, but do like to know that someone's thinking of me.
Right.
I definitely like to be alone, but what I really want is somebody to come over and do the dishes and like just make sure that stuff's taken care of, because that's when I live alone. And so that's the stuff that really becomes exhausting when you're trying to recover.
I love that.
Well, Cynthia, I know last year you went through 2 knee surgeries, and you had
and you were my caretaker.
You had to coordinate all of this by yourself, or I had to coordinate it. I'm just thinking about, whoa, what if we'd have had this tool? Like, how cool would that be that we could have put everything in one place?
That would have been better, because we had like, some people on a meal train, some people a GoFundMe like type of thing, some, this community engaging in that way. And so it would have been
some
really
people
great.
On text, your dad calling me randomly when he couldn't get a hold of you.
Luckily, I was on painkillers, so I don't remember that.
You don't remember any of that, right? And then walking the dog. I mean, like, it's so fascinating. I mean, just life is full and busy, right? And then you add in immobility or something to where somebody is incapacitated, and it levels it up, right? So,
absolutely.
So I'm just fascinated by this whole thing and how to access and how do they get involved? I know you're beta testing right now. I know you're about to go live. How do people get involved?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So we're also trying to make it as easy as possible. Right now, I would say if you do know someone who's going through a illness or a chronic condition or a scenario where they could benefit from this, on our website, aflote.com. And just a heads up, it's spelled AFLOTE.com. You can sign up to be an early beta tester, and we'd love any feedback we can get. But once it is live, it's super simple. Like, your friends, your family, the person who's going through the illness or recovery can set it up. But it's literally like 4 clicks to set it up, and we just ask for the name. You indicate what would be helpful, and you indicate what level of privacy you would like on the page. All of our information is private by default, in the sense that like no one can Google search and find any of this. But from there, then you can just easily begin sharing, and you can onboard the support circle. So to both of y'all's points, whether you have your Christine, who's your friend and helping you care through it, or your friends and family and neighbor, you can very easily invite them or just share a link, and then they just join, and they're able to follow along, and you can very easily broadcast updates. They can also send you notes. So, oftentimes, I know we all love receiving the physical get well cards, but even that sometimes is a struggle because you have to know their address and you have to know where to go. We make it very simple to be able to send messages to let them know you're thinking of them, and sort of encourage them through the process. So really making it very easy.
So good. So very good. And y'all, we will put all of this in the show notes. You will be able to, if you're running or if you're driving right now, don't worry. As you're listening to the podcast, it'll be in our show notes. You just go to womenconnectedinwisdompodcast.com, and you can re-listen to the broadcast. You can find the show notes. You can get everything you need. Cynthia, you look like you were about to say something.
Oh, I was just thinking about the community that I'm a part of, Emberlight. Emberlight is a Omega home, and so we care for the dying in community. And we have about 500 people, I think, in our immediate community. And this is just the kind of tool that would be so helpful for people who are ushering somebody through the end of life. And so a lot of the people in our community are already doulas, death doulas, but that population would be a great population to know about your tool.
100%. Yes, that would be wonderful. And I'll make a note of that, and also maybe shoot you and Christine a note to make sure I have the right info.
Yeah.
Right. That's a great idea, Cynthia. Because as somebody, I even think about, I think about illness and grief. What about with birth, Veronica? What about, can it be used for that too?
100%. And that one's definitely in our roadmap. We are trying to not overspread our focus at first, because I think maybe that was one of my learnings early on, but I do think pregnancy would be great, caregiving for aging parents, hospitalizations, all of that could be really valuable uses for this.
Well, and I think when you said that about aging parents, because I have some folks I work with that have 2 or 3 siblings or things like that, and sometimes that don't always live in the same place. And it's a real thing.
Yeah.
When you're dealing with aging parents and resources and what do you need, and doctor's appointments. And I know I have a friend today that was all day at doctor's appointments with their parent. One for, and being able to ask for support or help on things like that, even can you drive me, or can you pick me up, or, hey, I don't have this today, does somebody else have it? Right?
Yes. Yeah, 100%.
Oh my gosh. The possibilities of this are endless. I'm very excited about this.
Thank you. No, I'm excited too. Yeah, we have a big family on my mom's side. It's 12 siblings and, 40 some cousins, and my grandma is getting older, and I'm actually gonna set it up for them, because of course there's the one aunt who takes on so much of the workload and is doing everything. And so my goal is to try to add that so the other siblings can lean in a little bit more, and so that excuse of oh, I don't have the information is no longer really quite there. So we're excited to test that out as well.
Oh, I love it. That's
excellent. I'm just entering that phase with my parents. They're in their mid 80s now. And so everything is pretty even keel for the moment, but I definitely can feel it's impending.
Yeah, absolutely.
The thing. And I love that you said that Aflote is 4 clicks and set up. So it's something you could do while you're sitting in the waiting room. It's something you could do by your bedside. Because, I know that when my dad first had his catastrophic fall, we were in the hospital for 2 weeks. There was a lot of sitting, there was a lot of waiting. I just think about, okay, if we'd had this tool, how would that have helped support? Because I know there's some people that still probably don't have the news.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, it would have been a super simple setup, Christine. And, to your dad's, he probably would have welcomed, probably friends and family coming to visit. And
yeah, he would have turned it on. No, come visit.
There you go. There you go.
He did okay, but he was hysterical about some of that. Like he loved people coming, and then there were times he really just didn't want,
Yeah, it's very
whether
fair.
it was a test or he was
Yeah.
hurting or what was going on,
That's
right?
fair.
It's
Yeah.
totally fair. And
100%.
and we get to choose, right? We get
Yeah.
to choose.
Absolutely.
And I think sometimes that goes out the window too with some
Mhm.
people, is they think, oh, you're dying, like I've got to see you. Well, no,
I've
you
got to do
don't.
everything for you.
Yeah.
Right. And I know, because I've been at the bedside of many people as they crossed, or not been there, because sometimes people wait until you leave, or they
Mhm.
really need you to go away.
Yeah.
And having that, like my Aunt Joan sent everybody away, and it was her friend and local librarian who stopped by to check on her, who was with her, because she really clearly told me, I don't want any of my family to see me this way.
Mm.
And I was like, Aunt Joan, it's what I do. Like, and she's like, I know, but I want to be the adventurous aunt. I want to be I'm like, you're always going to be that, right?
Yeah.
But she had it in her head what she wanted, and
Absolutely.
she got
Yeah.
everything she wanted, which when I think about that, I couldn't even be mad. Like, I was out of town. She knew I was out of town. I was coming to her house 2 days later. And she sent me, I don't know that you know this story, Veronica. My listeners may, because I've told it before, but she sent me a goodbye text.
Hmm.
And I don't even know that she knew it was a goodbye text, but she was struggling. But it
Yeah.
was so different than anything she'd ever sent me. I knew. Like,
Hmm.
I was like, oh, she's going to go out sooner than I expected to.
Yeah.
And she crossed over that night.
Hmm.
And I think about how some people know, right?
Yeah.
When my grandpa, I was planning his 80th birthday party, and I was like, Papa, you okay with this? And he's like, yeah, if I'm here. He was not there.
Wow.
Like, that man would do anything to get out of a party. But I just think any resources we can have when
Yeah.
we're going through some of the most challenging times of our life, and sometimes the most joyous, to your point of weddings and births and things like that, but the tools that we can have to help us be more present
Hmm.
with the person, because I
Yeah.
think that is the most important thing.
Absolutely.
Well, Women Connected in Wisdom is a wide network of a lot of badass women.
True.
And I was just wondering, what do you need? What are your needs as a business owner?
Oh, that's such a sweet question. I do think if anyone happens to have connections to, any major oncologists or caregiving organizations or, health organizations, that could be a good connection for us and a good foot in the door to just bring awareness and collaborate with those organizations so that they can maybe encourage Aflote to their users. That would be a huge help. Again, I will reiterate the early beta testers, we're really trying to make this as helpful as possible. So any feedback is super welcome and encouraged, because we really want to make this as wonderful as possible. So we would really appreciate that as well.
Well, the
Excellent.
Emberlight community, Cynthia, I think is a fabulous.
For sure.
Fabulous.
Yes. And I do happen to know the tech lawyer for a giant health science center.
Oh, great. Wonderful.
There you go. Right co-host on the show today. I knew that.
Yes.
All right. I love it. All right, y'all. Well, incredible resource. We've named a lot of great resources today. What are y'all doing this week? What's your wisdom in action for your emotional and mental wellness?
I think on my end, I gave myself the opportunity. June, there was a lot of travel and there's so much going on, but I really gave myself the opportunity to sort of take June off in the sense of like relax and enjoy myself. And now we're now in July, so I'm starting to like ramp up, and I'm doing my best to just sort of, hold steady and not all of a sudden like jump back into chaos. So I think for me, it's just continuing to remember that, like, yes, we're building something amazing, but also that, there needs to be balance, and that, like Rome is not built in a day. So I'm just trying to continue to encourage myself to give myself grace to both of your points about, self-talk and being more loving with myself. I think that's often one where I have room for improvement. So just giving myself wiggle room to take things a little bit easier, and to talk to myself with self-love as I'm going through this path.
Oh, I love that. I think that's a good reminder at all times. And I feel you about the ramping up. All right, Dr. Phelps, what you thinking?
I have got a couple big projects going on right now, and my little perfectionist brain has a lot to say about it. And so I have a little tool that I use that I call the goddess box. And that means if there's a bunch of things I can't control, then they go in there, and it's not mine to deal with anymore.
Love that.
And so to have some discernment about what are my priorities, and then what are things that I just can't do anything about, and to really keep that perfectionism in check. That's how I'm going to care for myself.
I love it. Okay, practical question. Do you write it down? Do you
Yes.
draw it? What do you do before you put it in the box?
Oftentimes it's associated with a thing or a person, and so I write that on the top, and I flip it over, and I might write a sentence or something that describes what I want to release, really, what about it needs to be released. And I just use 3x5 cards that I've chopped into 4 pieces, and I keep them right in the box with a few trinkets. And so I have like little cards in there that are blank, and then my cards that are filled out. And so it makes it really easy. It's all very contained.
Right? I love that. What a great tool.
Yeah, it's very helpful, because in those moments where it's out of control, right? That is the hardest. It's so hard in life when things are out of control. So like your tool, Veronica, and the goddess box are very similar, because it's at those moments when we need that support the most.
Yeah, I love that.
Right. And I always tell folks, like, we need a lot of tools in our toolbox, because sometimes this tool works, it's a good fit, and you're like, oh, it works so great, and you go to use it the next time, it's like, oh, that didn't work at all. I need to reach back there and see what else I got, right?
Well, I have to say that there have been things that have been put in the box multiple times. That's allowed.
The honorary ones. I love that. Well, I think for my wisdom in action this week, for my mental and emotional wellness, I am going to the pool as much as possible. And I know that could go under physical wellness, but for me, if I'm in water or around water, it really helps with my emotional and mental too. So I'm going to seek opportunities to swim and float.
I love that.
Just to tie it all in.
Yeah.
Veronica, thank you so much for your work in this world. We're so excited for this new product, and I'm so excited to know you and be connected. We're just grateful for what you're creating and your gifts for the world, and it's just so good.
Thank you, Christine. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much as well, Cynthia. This was so fun to chat with you both, and I'm so grateful for you both having me here.
Absolutely. And keep us updated. Like when you're like, tag us at Women Connected in Wisdom podcast. And, our listeners and our followers are good at stuff like this. So tag us, we'll share it, and we'll make sure we get it out into the world, because what a great resource.
Thank you so much.
Our listeners love resources and great stories, which you have both. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Oh my gosh. So good.
I'm really excited to check this product out.
Right? I love amazing women and people that are just doing really cool stuff in the world. It's like, and I knew you'd be perfect for this, because you have background in tech, you have a background in creating apps, you have the inner ally. It's like, oh,
good stuff.
Right? Very good stuff. Anything you want to shout out to our listeners about what you're up to, or things that you want to tell folks before we wrap episode 231?
I um I am really enjoying what I am doing with Emberlight, which is the conscious living and dying community that I'm a part of. I am helping to revamp their curriculum and align it with their new values, and it that is really bringing me a lot of satisfaction to be a part of that community, and it feels very yummy in these times that can feel very isolating, right? Like
Mm,
I hear a lot about isolation, and this work that I get to do really brings me into community on a regular basis, whether I want it or not.
right. Boy, it's so true. It's so true. And Cynthia, how can folks reach you?
Well, you can email me at cynthia@innerally.com.
All right. I'm putting that in our show notes right as we talk
Excellent.
so they can reach you and find out more about the work you do in the world. I love that. All right, friend. Thank you so much for being my co host today. As always, it's so good to talk with you and to have your expertise and just have you on the show and be connected. And so, y'all, episode 231 is a wrap. And until next time, be well, be wise, and be whole.